Hello, this is a demonstration of longbone splinting. So you might use this technique in a scenario where the patient has sustained multiple fractures along their leg, or perhaps a single fracture of the tibia, some kind of knee injury in which their leg is straight and not bent. Context in which you would use other kinds of leg splitting would be a single femur fracture, for which we use a traction splint, or a knee injury in which their leg is in a bent position and it's painful for them to move it. So in this scenario, I'm going to say that this patient has a tibia fracture. So we're going to start by taking manual stabilization, the joint above and below, since it's a long bone fracture. I'm going to hand this off to my imaginary patient so I can continue demonstrating the skill. We're going to take PMS. That's always important before and after any kind of circumferential treatments. So I'm going to take a distal pulse down here. We may opt to take off the patient's shoe. That's a lot easier in many contexts because it gives you better information about PMS, to take a pedal pulse, and then we would get the patient to close their eyes and tell me what toe I'm touching.
Pinky.
Yep, again, easier without a shoe on. And then can you wiggle your toes for me? Great. Now we'll begin splinting. So for a typical patient, we may use 2 long boards, but since Ashani has really small legs, bless her heart, we can get away with this smaller board for the center. So remember that splints have a hard and a soft side. There's a cushion padding on one side, so we'll put the padding toward the patient for comfort. And then we will begin the splint. She will help me since there's only one of me right now. There's 2 different ways to do a long bone splint. You can do the saddle splint, or you can just do the typical wrap around, which is all you're expected to know. I'm going to quickly demonstrate the saddle splint, which is a little bit more complicated, but can be more comfortable for a patient, so use your discretion. For the saddle, I'm going to first go under the patient's leg, and then I'm going to wrap around the boards completely. So I went under the leg and then above the boards, so it's kind of like the leg is laying in a hammock within the boards, and then I'm going to go all the way around like this. So you can see that her leg is kind of supported by this hammock down here, and then otherwise the dressing is going all the way around the boards. We tie knots always on the board so that we can hold them really tight and not have a knot on the patient's skin, which can be painful or uncomfortable. I'm going to undo this and finish the splinting in the way that you're expected to do it. It's a little simpler. So remember that when we secure boards to patients, we're going to do so in a way that does not exacerbate injury or be uncomfortable for the patient. So if my injury is right here, I'm not going to tie right over the injury. We can start by doing one tie at the top on the patient's femur. Depending on their anatomy, you may opt to do it 2 ties up here at the femur, depending on where the injury is. This can all be different, but with 3 ties total, I'm going to do 1 on Ashani's femur. And here I tied a little bow just so that it's easier for me to untie at the very end, but in the field you can just tie a knot, tie it tight, because we do not want it to come undone. Next, I'll tie just under the knee but above my fracture, which is in the middle of the tibia. I'll wrap around both boards and around the whole leg and tie just a regular knot. And then here, I'll do 1 more tie below the injury. Again, tying really tightly because we don't want the patient's leg to be able to move at all, around during transport. So that's basically the entire skill. Of course, we're going to finish with PMS because that's important after any circumferential treatment. So I'm going to feel for a pulse. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and tell me which toe I'm touching.
My big toe.
Yep, and I'm going to ask you to move your toes for me. Okay, so at this point, once everything is secure, we can also release manual stabilization, and we can load our patient up for transport.